We're going to start our program here with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Well, thank you. And welcome, everybody, to our December luncheon, holiday festive. I mean, last month was the holiday boutique, but this is our December luncheon, and everyone looks nice and festive. So thank you. As I said, the raffle closing should be closed now, so hopefully everybody got their tickets for that. I would like to welcome some new members, and it's my delight every month that we continue to get new members into the group, and we're so excited about that. Carol Ann Malinowski, and today is her birthday, so we can all wish her a happy birthday as well. So happy birthday, Carol Ann. Allison Mowry, and welcome. I got to meet her a few minutes ago. We're delighted that she's joined us. Patricia Slater, yes, right here, a friend of Kathy Olson's. So again, we're also delighted you're here. And Susan Tilden. Where is Susan? Susan, where? She's not here, okay. She is new, though, and we do welcome her, hopefully, next time in person. We have several guests of today as well. Karen Davis, although had been a member, she's back and forth a little bit because she's a busy lady. She works, so I'm delighted you can join us today. Laura Fitzgerald, a guest as well. Marjorie Holland, yes, very interested in the program, a friend of Cindy's, and Gina Holland as well. Sorry, my typo, sorry. And we're delighted to have our guest speaker here today that will be formally introduced a little bit later, but Nancy Franks, looking forward to this program on White House Christmases, so we're delighted to have her. She was here in April. Unfortunately, I missed that program, but I heard it was delightful, and we're so pleased she's back again. I do want to thank all the members of Mashpee Women's Club who make events like this and other things we do happen. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't really see until you start getting involved. So there's so many people. One I want to introduce for a few brief comments is Carolyn Holmes, who works on our programs, putting together, getting the speakers, organizing these, and she works pretty far in advance. She's got things lined up, all kinds of wonderful programs. So welcome to Carolyn. She's going to say a few brief words about some upcoming programs.
Hello, ladies. I'm so happy to be here today with such a wonderful crowd. Well, in January, we're having game day. It was wonderful last year. We played cribbage, bridge, mahjong, bingo. All you have to do is send your information as to who you're playing with, the names of the people. They don't have to send the money with it. They can all send the money separately. But this way we can set up so that all of the tables are appropriately fixed so that people can sit if you're playing bridge and there's 4 people, but whatever. So game day was a big sellout last year. And I don't want to talk food, but they had my kind of food. They had pizzas and sliders and the fries were to die for. Just in case, okay, in February we're going to be a little happy and a little healthy. George Frangilla was coming to talk about heart health. Okay, there will be a healthy menu, there'll be salmon. For those of you who don't like salmon, and I'm one of them, you can request a special meal from Cindy. But anyways, it's great, it's wonderful to see all of you, and it's such happy times together. I'll be introducing Nancy, who's back by popular demand, and you will hear about her later.
Can I just add one more thing? So when you send in who's going to play, I'd like one person from a game to email me all of the names of your game and the name of your game. And then as Carolyn said, everyone should pay individually as long as one person on your team, on your game table, lets me know everyone who should be seated together. All right?
Okay, got it? We look forward to it. It's a fun luncheon that we have. I also do want to thank our greeters today out at the hospitality table, coordinated by, excuse me, please. Excuse me. I did want to thank Terry Cordo, who coordinates along with Diane Tierney, who's not here today, but coordinates every month the greeters. And today, this day, we had Nancy Coppola, Kathy Wallace, and Kathy Ripa also helping along with Terry, greeting you out front. So thank you. Our raffle, monthly raffle, is handled on an ongoing basis by Deb Longchamp. She's out counting things right now, so doing a little work before lunch. But today the tickets, she was assisted by Terry Taylor and Pat Doyle. Just want to thank them. Centerpieces are also handled by Carolyn on an ongoing basis, but today they were provided by Linda Gervich. So I can thank Linda for the beautiful plants at our table. And Cindy, you said your few words, so we're all set with that. So now onward to lunch. We're going to call the first table with our guest speaker up first, and then I guess Cindy will announce the tables to follow. Because we do have a buffet today. It won't be sit-down service, so. And we'll be back a little bit later after lunch. So enjoy. Thank you. I'm going to leave this here.
And the dessert was excellent. We are so lucky we have Nancy Franks back by popular demand. I don't know if you came in April. She did a fabulous job with Here Comes the Bride. Well, today she's taken us to the White House, and she's going back 200 years. She's going to show us traditions, foods, company, decorations. I can't wait. So without further ado, here is Nancy.
Thank you very much. So, while I was eating lunch, I discovered that there are people in the audience today who have been to some White House celebrations for Christmas. So, if they want to add anything, feel free to shout out and share your experiences. So we're going to go back to the very first Christmas at the White House, which was 1800, and John Adams and Abigail Adams moved in November. And as when any of us do renovations, the White House was not ready for them. This artist's rendition makes it look absolutely perfect and ready to go. It was, at that time, called the Presidential Mansion. It wasn't until Teddy Roosevelt coined the phrase, the name, White House, and it has stuck. So this painting gives you an idea of what the White House was like that first Christmas. They didn't have the light fixtures up. It was very dark, very damp. They were hanging laundry in empty rooms. And if you'll notice, it's a little light here, so it's gonna be hard for you to see some of the detail. But with Abigail Adams is their granddaughter, Susanna. And Susanna moved in with them. Just after they moved in, her dad, who was their son Charles, passed away of pleurisy. And so the President and Mrs. Adams decided to hold a Christmas party in her honor. And the invitations that they sent out are considered the first White House Christmas cards. Unlike today, Abigail did all of the planning herself. That wouldn't be happen with any of our recent First Ladies. The guests were friends and family and diplomats, government workers and their family. So they had an orchestra, they served dinner, cake and punch for dessert. The guests sang Christmas carols, and there was, as sometimes happens at a Christmas party, a little drama, but it wasn't the adults, it was the children, because someone broke Susanna's new doll dish, and she was very upset, and so she took the girl who had done it, took her doll, and bit the nose off the doll. Now, when I was doing research for this, I just pull up an article and I'll read it quickly, see if there's anything interesting. And at first glance, I thought Susanna had bit the nose off the girl. And so I thought, oh, that's definitely staying in. But President Adams had to intervene and, make sure the problem did not escalate. So the gingerbread houses are something that we all look for photos, and they never look like the ones that we make at home. So they're always in the same place, except for one time when they made it too large, but it's always in the state dining room that they use for receptions and state dinners and luncheons. It's always on this mahogany console table that has a connection to Massachusetts. It was made in 1902 by the A.H. Davenport Company of Boston. It's supported by 2 American eagles. And then behind it, which always, adds to the gingerbread house because you see the reflection, is this English pier mirror, circa 1790. It was gifted to the White House in 1946. So this is the very first gingerbread house that sat in this location, and that was 1968. Now they believe that there were other gingerbread houses over the years, but this is the one that started the gingerbread tradition. It had been gifted to President Lyndon Johnson by Edward Shapiro of Bedford Hills, New York, placed in this location, and they have been there ever since, except for 1 year. So here is the man who started off the magic, Hans Raffert, and he was born in Germany, January 1927. 1969, he was hired as a sous chef. And then November 1969, he created the first gingerbread house. Now, because he was from Germany, he was familiar with gingerbread houses just being A-frame. And you will notice that all of the houses that he made while he was at the White House were A-frame houses. So here is 1969 with Tricia Nixon, 1971 with Pat Nixon and Julie Eisenhower Nixon. And here is the 1972 house, and if you like that, the Nixon Library sells a little ornament for $19.95 that is a replica of that house. Now, it was bound to happen, but in 1973, they were having a Christmas party, and a child reached out and broke off a piece and popped the gingerbread house in their mouth. And so since that time, whenever children are in the White House, there are always guards. And at first it was just a social secretary who happened to be free, stand by it, saying hands off. But then in 1977, They placed 2 Marines on either side of the house. That'll intimidate the children. And so they have been there ever since. There's Amy Carter. She did not break off a piece. She's just admiring it. 1979, 1980. And you really have to look closely to see the difference because they were quite similar. 1981, now a woman that I was talking to here worked for the White House in the 1980s when the Reagans were there, so perhaps they were at this party. Children of diplomats, 375 children between the ages of 6 and 11, so it's a wonder the gingerbread house is still standing. 1981, he's putting the finishing touches on it, and the gingerbread house is made in the kitchen, but then transported to the mahogany table, and sometimes now they weigh 400 or 500 pounds. Here is Nancy Reagan holding her new dog Rex, and we'll meet him a little later, 1984, 1988. 1991, it was his last gingerbread house with Barbara Bush. And then we had, this was the beginning of the themed gingerbread houses that we still have today. That is executive pastry chef Roland Messner, and his first gingerbread house was a themed American Christmas village, and he's shown there adding the finishing touches, and his assistant is making a marzipan Santa Claus. So here's a close-up of his creation. For my first house, Mrs. Bush gave me permission to be as creative as I wanted to be, and so I undertook the construction of an entire gingerbread village, including marzipan likenesses of the first family. So you can maybe get some ideas if you haven't made your family's gingerbread house yet. This is 1992, and this is a scale model of the White House. And because the Clintons had a cat named Socks, it was called the House of Socks, and it featured 22 marzipan sculptures of Socks, like on the lawn and on the porch and doing various things. And it looks like Socks gave it the stamp of approval. He's wondering, that's not a marzipan, that's the real Socks. Now this is really neat. In 1994, Chef Messenger surprised President Clinton, and the White House was a replica of his boyhood home in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And so here you have the actual home and the gingerbread house. So maybe you're getting some ideas on what you could do for your house. And then the following year, it was Hillary Clinton's turn. And so this is Hillary's childhood home in Park Ridge, Illinois. And I like how the top 2 windows are deep so you can see into the rooms. And there is the home, and there is the gingerbread house. The following year, the theme, 1996, it was a salute to Chelsea Clinton. She had danced in the Washington Ballet for a few years, and so the theme was the Nutcracker. In 1998, this is the one that did not fit on the table. It was a snow-covered castle, too long to be placed on the mahogany console table, so it was in the same room, but not in the location. And I think now they're very careful about their dimensions. And here is the 2000, and it's a gingerbread landscape of national monuments. And so it includes the White House, the Washington Monument, the Jefferson Memorial, and then across the Potomac, it is Mount Vernon, the home of George Washington. So here is another look at it. And you're going to see that the recent gingerbread houses are all covered in chocolate now. And I don't know if that is to make them easier to make in advance or easier to stay together, but they have abandoned this, which I think is neat, an actual gingerbread house. So this was just a few months after the September 11th attacks, and they wanted to honor that. So on top, this is a replica of the 1800s White House presidential mansion that the Adams moved into. But on top, there are two angels holding a star, and then there's the American flag flying on top. 2002, the theme was all creatures great and small, and it honored all of the different pets that have lived in the White House, from the ordinary cats and dogs to sheep and goats and different birds. And they're even though it is a myth that alligators lived in the White House, there are some alligators in that scene. So it's not true, but the White House is perpetuating it. 2005, and then now, that was the end of the gingerbread as we know it. And this is 2007, it's a replica of the south side of the White House, so you see the stairs going up. And the theme was holidays in the national parks. So you'll notice that those are animals that we wouldn't see in Washington, D.C. that would be at the national parks. We've got a polar bear and bison and American eagle in the tree. And then to honor the pets of George W. Bush, up on the top are Barney and Miss Beasley, his two dogs. So now we have a female executive pastry chef, Susan Morrison. She arrived in 1995. She was just a contract pastry employee. 2002, she was the assistant pastry chef. In 2011, she worked on her first gingerbread house, and then in 2014, she was appointed executive pastry chef. So here in 2015, it was a dark chocolate covered gingerbread house, and this was the first time that it featured both the East Wing and the West Wing. And there's just so much detail, like even this wreath that hangs over the door has probably 12 or 15 different figures made out of marzipan. This is 2018. Melania Trump is showing off the gingerbread house to former First Lady Laura Bush, and it was surrounded by replicas of monuments in Washington, D.C., similar to the one that we saw that was made with gingerbread. And then in 2019, it included American landmarks. So on that side, we have the Golden Gate Bridge, the Space Needle, and Mount Rushmore. And over here, Alamo, Liberty Bell, and the Statue of Liberty. In 2022, it was the anniversary of or the theme, I should say, was We the People. So that is a sugar cookie constitution in the back. And there on the left is the Independence Hall, where both the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence were signed. And then this is 2023, and it was the 200th anniversary of the book, The Night Before Christmas, of the poem. And so you see a sugar cookie book behind the White House. And this is, if you want to try to recreate it at home, you'll need 40 sheets of sugar cookie dough, 40 sheets of gingerbread dough, 90 pounds of pastelage, which is the cement, edible cement that holds it together, 30 pounds of chocolate, and 50 pounds of royal icing. Now, in interviews that I've read, they often ask, what happens to the gingerbread house when Christmas is over? And all they will say is, it goes away. So they won't tell you, but they did say in an article that with all the people who are passing by and all the germs that it would be exposed to, wouldn't really be a good idea to eat it. At our house, if we make gingerbread houses, we put them out for squirrels and birds, and that is always entertaining to watch them, you know, yanking the roof off. So I don't know, maybe they do that. And this is the one that is in the White House right now. The theme is peace and light, and you can see that certainly reflects that. So we're going to take a peek at the National Christmas Tree. Where has the National Christmas Tree come from? All over the United States, but one state you will not see there is Massachusetts. We need to find a really great tree and see if we can get a National Christmas Tree from our home state. You'll notice that New York and Colorado have sent it numerous years. And then what type of Christmas tree? Quite an assortment: balsam fir, red spruce, red cedar, all different types of trees. And then the location of the tree really hasn't altered that much. In front of the White House, behind the White House, on the White House grounds. This map shows that it's gone from Lafayette Park, it's now on the ellipse, and that has been for several years, and so that's probably where it's going to stay. The first National Christmas Tree was when Calvin Coolidge was president, and his home state was Vermont, so they were the ones to donate it. It was cut down in the Green Mountain National Forest, a 45-foot balsam, and it was a bit of a publicity stunt because the electrical companies and organizations that were involved were looking for a way to showcase using electric lights on outdoor displays to families. It was sponsored by the Middlebury College alumni, and the president of Middlebury College traveled with the tree and brought it to Washington. But it didn't have a very good trip, and the bottom 10 feet of the tree were all damaged. So what they had to do is cut off branches from other trees and stick them in and fill it in to fatten it up. It had over 2,500 red, green, and white lights. The bulbs were a gift of the Electrical League of Washington, and the Society for Electrical Development really thought that this was going to be exactly what they needed to get people from all over the United States decorating trees outside. And here's an advertisement at the time, so it wasn't a scheme to sell light bulbs, but it was a nice celebration. The Coolidges belonged to the First Congregational Church, so the choir from their church sang on the North Portico. At 3 p.m. they started a 2-hour concert, and all the words to the carols and hymns were published in the newspapers so people could bring it along and sing along with the choir. December 24th, 6,000 people had gathered around the tree. At 5 p.m. the Coolidges walked over. Their 2 sons were home from boarding school in Pennsylvania. The president pushed the button, lit the lights. There was a spotlight from the Washington Monument shining down on the tree, and there were 3,000 school children on hand to sing Christmas carols. So here is a look at the tree. You can see the proximity of the Washington Monument, the headlines the following day, and a program. And then the party continued. At 9 p.m., there were 9,000 people gathered, and the president invited the people to stay. There were 2 church choirs singing and the Navy band. And the festivities lasted until midnight. And the sad thing is that it wasn't until midnight, after everyone had left, that the African-American residents of the city were invited to go onto the lawn and view the tree. So that is a little bit of a sad thing. 1941, it was just 17 days after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, And that was the first time that the tree was actually on the White House lawn. And President Franklin D. Roosevelt welcomed Winston Churchill. He spent the holidays in Washington. At 8:36, FDR began his speech. Our strongest weapon against this war is the conviction of the dignity and brotherhood of man, which Christmas signifies more than any other day or any other symbol. So Winston Churchill, I love the crowd that's gathered. Winston Churchill spoke after FDR, and he said, "I spend this anniversary far from my country, far from my family, and yet I can truly say I do not feel far from home." 1946, here's President Harry Truman. 1948, it was televised, and so they added more white lights, and they also added a star-shaped tree topper that flashed on and off to make it more visually appealing for people seeing it on television. 1954, there were some changes because they had been lighting the Christmas tree on Christmas Eve, and they decided to back it up 3 weeks so that they could have a 3-week celebration. And also, they added the Pathway of Peace, which they still have today, and it features 56 trees, one from each of the 50 states, or representing each of the 50 states, and the 5 territories in the District of Columbia, and each tree has student-made decorations by students from that particular state or territory. Now, this is a very interesting story. 1958, Alaska was not yet a state, and the territory governor of Alaska gifted 14 reindeer and a caribou to come to the tree lighting. Their original homes was Kotzebue, Alaska, on the very edge of the Arctic Circle, so they couldn't be further away. The senior keeper from the National Zoo went to Alaska to come home with them, and they had quite a journey. They trapped the herd, they got on a plane, traveled for 650 miles, then they were on a steamship for 1,400 miles, and then they got into trucks and for a 3,100 journey, but they split it in half. They went from Seattle to Billings, and maybe they got to, get out and stretch their legs. Then from Billings to Washington, but don't worry, they did have some VIP accommodations. They each had their own plywood stall within the truck, and they could sit or stand. And then during that voyage, they also had to transition their diet because they were used to a diet of lichen that was characteristic, native to the Arctic Circle. So as they were traveling, they were getting them used to alfalfa, which would be their new food. So those are not the exact 8 reindeer, but they were given a clean bill of health when they arrived. But imagine that it was almost like trying out for a play, so they only chose 8 reindeer to be near the National Christmas Tree. The rest went to the National Zoo, so the 8 reindeer entertained all the guests. They led Santa's sleigh in the pageant of peace on the 23rd. They watched President Eisenhower light the national tree. On New Year's Day, they reunited the herd, and thankfully, all of them became permanent residents of the National Zoo, because they probably did not want to do that trip again. And everything worked out great because within a year, there were 7 new reindeer calves. So this was the 1962 tree. It was coming from the San Isabel National Forest in Colorado. And I chose this because they also sent a tiny tree for Caroline Kennedy. Here is 1965, President Lyndon Johnson hosted the British Prime Minister and his wife for the pageant of peace. And this was the 1970 tree, nicknamed the Bad Luck Tree. It looks a lot like some type of Halloween mummy on that train car, but the train derailed twice while it was coming from South Dakota to Washington, D.C., and it made the news. And then when it arrived, there was a bad storm, 50-mile-per-hour wind gust, and it toppled the tree. This is 1979. The tree remained unlit in honor of the hostages, and they only lit the star at the top to be a sign of hope. 2014, I like this because when it all started, the African American population was not allowed to be at the tree lighting, and here is Barack Obama joining in on the festivities. 2023 with Joe Biden and Jill. And then this was just last week. It's a 35-foot red spruce from the George Washington and Jefferson National Forest in Virginia. And it's a far cry from the first tree lighting when anyone in Washington could just walk over. People had to apply in October to be chosen for a lottery to attend the tree lighting. So there is a national menorah. It took far too long to start it, but it was President Carter who got things going and recognized Hanukkah with a menorah lighting. December 1979, it was held in Lafayette Park, right across from the White House. And this was the first time that the public saw Jimmy Carter in 100 days because he had been undergoing a self-imposed isolation because of the hostages. So this was the first time that people saw him. Very windy evening. Notice they had to put enclose it in a box because it kept going out. The Secretary of Interior had originally turned down the application to have a national menorah, and it was one of Carter's advisors who approached him and said, okay, if you're not going to approve that, don't approve the request for the national Christmas tree. And then suddenly everything was okay. The match box that contained the matches that he used to light the menorah is on display at the Capitol Jewish Museum, and there's a little yellow post-it on it with a little note from Jimmy Carter. Here is Hanukkah 1987. Ronald Reagan was presented with a menorah by representatives from the American Friends of Lubavitch. 1989, George H.W. Bush, and this is a Hanukkah celebration in the old Executive Office building. This is a great story. 1993, they bring in some students from a Jewish school. One of the girls gets a little too close to the menorah, but it's her ponytail, so she doesn't realize that she is on fire. And so this is the frame from the video of the event where President Clinton is putting out the little small fire on the ponytail. And of course, it made headlines the following day. Small ponytail blaze, hair-raising Hanukkah party. President saves 6-year-old from brush with fire. So it really wasn't that bad. I read a great interview that was done in 2020 with the adult, the girl, all grown up, she's a lawyer. And she said, I remember standing there and then people their expressions changed. Bill Clinton had his hands around my ponytail And all of these people, I don't know if they were Secret Service or there were a lot of reporters as well, but all these people started rushing towards me. And she thought that, she said, you know, it was a little boring for a 6-year-old, and she said she thought maybe she had nodded off. So they did keep a scrapbook, and her grandmother wrote to the president, because of course you would do that. And so he wrote back to the grandmother and said, "I regret that your granddaughter's visit to the Oval Office was filled with such drama. I'm thankful, however, that Ilana turned out to be just fine." So here you'd think that the, you know, years following that, they'd maybe have it roped off. But these are Jewish primary day school students, 2000, 2001. This was the first menorah lighting in the executive residence in 2001, and this menorah had been lent to the White House by the Jewish Museum of New York. And then this is the backstory of the Hanukkah 2008. In 1951, the Israeli Prime Minister had given President Truman this bronze 18th century menorah, and it was a thank you gift for him helping to establish the State of Israel in 1948. So when Harry Truman left office, the menorah went to the Truman Library and Museum. And so here is the grandson of the Israeli Prime Minister and the grandson of President Truman lighting the menorah together in 2008. In 2005, First Lady Laura Bush they were having a Hanukkah celebration, and she wanted to make sure that the White House main kitchen maintained the highest standards of kosher. So they invited a team of rabbis and assistants, and they prepared the kitchen and all of the utensils 1 to 2 days in advance of the party. 2013, there were 2 celebrations, and Barack Obama is lifting up one of 2 sisters. And this, if you can notice, each of the candles is supported by the Statue of Liberty. And this was made by a man who escaped Nazi Germany and came to America. And then here is the second ceremony of that year. 2 Holocaust survivors from Poland are lighting the menorah. In 2017, Donald Trump's grandchildren, Arabella and Joseph Kushner, lit the menorah at the celebration. And in 2021, it was Vice President Harris and her husband Doug who handled the celebration, and Doug spoke about his Jewish heritage. And the National Creche has been a part of the White House since the Kennedy administration. And it is a late 18th century, created in Naples, Italy, terracotta and wood. Originally had 22 figures, and it was loaned to Jackie by this woman here, a philanthropist, Jane Engelhard. And in 1967, it was officially given to the White House by way of Lady Bird Johnson. And in 1978, there were 10 additional figures donated, and then the funds for a new tableau for it to sit on. In 1963, the creche was to be John F. Kennedy's Christmas card, and they had arranged the creche to resemble a Christmas tree. It was a 4.5 by 6.5 inch Hallmark card, and inside there was an American eagle holding an olive branch and arrows in its talons. The message inside said, "With our best wishes for a blessed Christmas and a Happy New Year." And then they created some cards that simply said, "Happy New Year." The president signed fewer than 75 cards before his assassination. The cards were not sent out. and just one card is now on collection at the Smithsonian. 1965, 1978. This is the 1985 party hosted by Nancy Reagan, and it was for children of diplomats. And that is the child actor Emmanuel Lewis, who was Webster, and then Santa was Willard Scott. 1986, 1993 with Hillary Clinton in front of it, and this is it in 2020. So there is a cranberry tree on display at the White House every year. Not a lot of photos of it, but this woman, a floral designer from Maryland, volunteered during the Ford administration, and so one day she showed up at the White House with styrofoam cone, moss, fresh cranberries, completed it in one afternoon, and they have been doing it ever since. And she has, there is a YouTube video of her explaining how she does it. Because the cranberries soften, they put them out at Thanksgiving time, go all the way to New Year's. They make 2 trees and keep one refrigerated and then swap them out halfway through. And it takes more than 200 cranberries to make the tray. First Lady Nancy Reagan loved the cranberry tree because her favorite color was red. And that, just the angle here makes it look so big. So the White House Christmas tree inside the White House, and if the presidents were here, there would be a little disagreement about who had the first White House Christmas tree. Franklin Pierce would insist that it was him, and some historians believe that it was either 1853 or 1856, but President Benjamin Harrison would insist that it was him that had the first tree, and it is, and more reliable historians believe that it was Benjamin Harrison in either 1888, 1889, or 1891 in what is now the Yellow Room. So there were years without a Christmas tree, and there is no record of Abraham Lincoln having a Christmas tree. And then in 1901, when Teddy Roosevelt moved in, he had a large family, and he thought it was too cramped for his family to have a Christmas tree. And you'll see in a minute that his sons had another idea. And then in 1922, they know that there wasn't a Christmas tree. First Lady Florence Harding was ill, and so they kept the decorations at a minimum. In 1899, President William McKinley was bombarded with letters begging him not to have a real Christmas tree in the White House. People felt that it was having an impact on the forest, and what he did, everyone would copy, and they thought it was overall a very wasteful practice. So in 1902, Theodore Roosevelt's children were not going to go with his idea of not having a tree. So they enlisted the help of a White House carpenter, and he cut down just the 2-foot treetop, and the electrician helped them put lights on it, and they hid it in a closet, which probably wasn't the safest thing to do. Quentin said, just look here for a minute, I want you to glance into this old closet. And so Archie pressed a button, turned on the lights, opened the closet door, and there was the tree. And Theodore Roosevelt said, but first there was a surprise for me and also for their good mother, for Archie had a little birthday tree of his own, which he had rigged up with the help of one of the carpenters in a big closet. And we all had to look at the tree, and each of us got a present off of it. There was also one present each for Jack the dog, Tom Quartz the kitten, and Algonquin the pony, whom Archie would no more think of neglecting than I would neglect his brothers and sisters. Then all the children came into our bed, and there they opened their stockings. So it was Jackie Kennedy who got the who came up with the idea of having a theme for the Christmas tree decorations. And so her theme was the Nutcracker Suite Ballet. This is the Nixon family, and Pat Nixon came up on this tree with the theme was American flowers. And this was one of the Nixons' favorite family portraits in front of the tree. 1980, First Lady Rosalind Carter, the theme was Victorian Christmas, and those are her grandchildren Sarah and Jason. 1978, Betty Ford, the theme was handmade craft, thrift, and recycling, and it was a bad economy, so she came up with the idea of making your own ornaments. 1978, she had the theme Antique Toys, and most of these decorations were loaned by the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. 1986, Nancy Reagan's theme was Mother Goose, and then there were all sorts of soft sculptures around the tree of various Mother Goose rhymes. 1991, First Lady Barbara Bush, the theme was needlework, so it was red bulbs, red balls, and all needlework designs. First Lady Hillary Clinton in 1994 chose the 12 Days of Christmas. 2005, Laura Bush chose All Things Bright and Beautiful. And this is a great story. So each year they reach out because every White House Christmas tree has ornaments that were sent in from across the United States. So the White House reached out to 370 artists. And so this woman here, Deborah Lawrence from Seattle, she had a little bit of an axe to grind with George W. Bush. So her ball featured Democratic Representative Jim McDermott, and he had signed the resolution to begin impeachment against George W. Bush. And then the white lines that you see, she cut and pasted all of the text of the impeachment document. So it does show that they look over all of the ornaments because hers was rejected. Out of 370, hers was the only one that was rejected. But with the invitation to make the ornament comes an invitation to go to the party. And so she showed up. She probably expected like a little argument, but they let her right in. 2009, Michelle Obama, the theme was Reflect, Rejoice, and Renew. And I love what she did. She took out 800 balls that had been on previous trees and used those and asked artists to remake those balls. And so they featured landmarks, popular and less popular from all across the United States, from the Statue of Liberty to Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. And you can just imagine how many ornaments are stored away. And so it was nice that they got refurbished. 2015, Michelle Obama's theme was a timeless tradition, and this was a salute to troops, veterans and their families. So there were messages of hope for the troops, and red, white, and blue ornaments, and then gold star garland. 2023, Jill Biden's theme was the magic, wonder, and joy, and so the focus was on how children embrace the holiday. And then this is the tree, 2024. And when they announced that the photos were out, I was looking for the tree, and all I came up with was this carousel, and it took a while for me to realize the tree is inside the carousel. So the theme is peace and light. It's an 8.5-foot North Carolina Fraser fir. It has 3D candy ornaments, And the ornaments include the names of all 50 states and territories. And then there is a reindeer, a fox, a penguin, and a polar bear, and they move up and down around the tree. So take a peek into some family time. This is Grover Cleveland's Christmas tree, 1894. It is the first White House Christmas tree inside with electric lights, red, white, and blue bulbs. And this is a political cartoon from 1902. I mentioned that the Roosevelts have moved in November. And so the caption says, I hear there are some kids in the White House this year. 1939, here's FDR with a family photo in the East Room. And here's a cute picture of him holding his 2 grandchildren. On his right knee is Franklin Roosevelt III, and then on his left knee is his grandson Johnny. 1952, Harry Truman and his family. Not every president chooses to spend Christmas at the White House. Here's 1956, Dwight Eisenhower and Mamie are holding their youngest grandchild, Mary Jean. And here is the family portrait on Christmas Eve 1960 and having a Christmas meal. This picture was taken prior to Christmas because the Kennedys did not stay at the White House for Christmas. 1967, here's Lyndon Johnson and Lady Bird, and then their little dog Yuki, who was a mixed breed that they found at a Texas gas station. And the next thing he knows, he's in the White House for Christmas. 1967, here are the Johnsons, and Lady Bird said it was a wonderful Christmas, our first Christmas with our grandson, little Lynn, and the first Christmas our whole family had spent together at the White House. And here they are in 1968. And then 1973, this was President Richard Nixon's last Christmas at the White House, and they did get outside and make a snowman. And here are the Reagans in 1983, a nice family portrait. And then this is Rex, who you saw a little earlier. It was an early Christmas gift from the conservative writer William F. Buckley. And Rex is a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, and he replaced the Reagans' previous dog that they believed was a little too large for the White House. And here is President George H.W. Bush's grandchildren being treated to the night before Christmas. They spent Christmas Eve at the White House. And now we're going to end by taking a peek at some Christmas cards. So some of them started out very simple. This is Calvin Coolidge's card that was published in the newspapers, a letter to the American people, handwritten on White House stationery. Christmas is not a time or season, but a state of mind. Here is 1930, and this is pretty clever if you've done any renovations at your house this year. The Hoovers put in a little piece of pine wood that was left over from renovations at the White House. Here is 1931, a lot like what people do now, a simple photograph, and it shows President Hoover in the Rose Garden, and he actually hand wrote messages at the bottom of the card. 1934 and 1942, the Roosevelts did the same thing, took pretty ordinary pictures, nothing staged. In the 1942 card, they're just simply sitting at a drop-leaf table outside of the White House. 1945 and 46, President and Mrs. Truman. 1956 and 1959, the Eisenhowers, and that, surprisingly, is not the White House. I believe it says Eisenhower Farms, so it must have been where they came from. 1962 and 1961, the Kennedys card, And only 100 cards were ordered with just season's greetings. They were sensitive that not everyone that they were sending greetings to celebrated Christmas. This was the 1963 card after the assassination of President Kennedy, and the nation was still in mourning. And so it was a very simple card, and it either said Blessed Christmas or Season's Greetings. 1967, this is the Johnson Christmas card, and you'll see that the Blue Room has been the subject of some Christmas cards. And they ordered 2,600 cards and 3,000 gift prints. And this appears to be when they started the tradition of ordering prints to also give as gifts of whatever the Christmas card was. Here is President and Mrs. Nixon, very simple. It's hard to see, but that's the White House over there. And then 1970. This is the 1979 card. It's an 1860 painting of the President's house. American Greeting or Hallmark produces the cards. 105,000 cards, 7,000 Christmas prints. And I was saying to someone earlier that if you go on eBay, you can see that people receive their cards and then they put them up for sale, because you can get just about any Christmas card, pretend that you got it. Here is a Reagan Christmas card, again of the Blue Room, and you're probably wondering who is paying for all these cards. And it is not, well, it's not the American taxpayers, but anyone who donates to either the Republican National Committee or Democratic National Committee. And they, in 1985, they believed that it was about $27,000 at that time. Now this is so funny to me. This is Bill Clinton's card. It is the Blue Room, but it is called the Fantasy Blue Room. So the artist from Connecticut, he painted socks in there, but he also painted his own dog into the White House Christmas card. And then this painting really isn't in the Blue Room. It is what the artist sees if he looks out his window, and that is an inn in Connecticut. But there is a little bit of a White House tie-in because George Washington stayed in that inn. But imagine the nerve of putting your own dog on the White House Christmas card. This is the 2002 card. It's a realistic painting, and this card gets a distinction because it's the first time they ordered over 1 million Christmas cards. And that, you can find that on eBay for just $23. So it seems like they try to one-up each time. This was the Obama's Christmas card. It was a 3D pop-up, and it also popped up with Bo and Sunny, their two dogs, and the American flag. And it was signed by the entire family. Originally, the cards would just say President Nixon, President and Mrs. Nixon. But this is a little more personal. They all signed it, including Sunny and Bo. This is Donald Trump's card in 2019, a gold American flag. He was born on Flag Day. And here is his card from 2020, a gold map of the United States. And this is Joe Biden's card from 2022, and I think that's neat. Slides out from that cut envelope. And then this was last year's card, 2023, again, a pop-up of the White House. And I tried to find the 2024 card, but they're not releasing it yet. And so you'll just have to check your mailbox and see if you're on the list. So thank you very much. We're going to have a raffle, and you have a little number on the back of that, on the treat that I left you. And also, I'll do a little advertising because I am speaking at the Mashpee Garden Club in, which I know some of you are members, because that's how I got the invitation. And so that is a Valentine's theme in February, so I hope that some of you will come to that.